Welcome to part 1 of week 2, Splines and Generators. In this video, we're only going to be covering splines. There are a variety of 3D modeling methods. In this course, we're going to cover 4 of them. We have already covered the first one, which is primitive modeling. This method uses primitive shapes like spheres and cubes to create more complex objects. Today, we will cover the second one, which is spline modeling. The other two that we will cover are non-destructive modeling, which we will discuss in week 3, and polygonal modeling, which we will discuss in week 4. So, what is spline modeling? First, let's talk about what splines are. I'm sure that you have heard the word splines before, whether in Illustrator or in your math class. In 3D, splines are lines in a 3D space that are connected by vertices. You can create splines yourselves or use the preset splines that Cinema 4D provides. The splines that Cinema provides can be found in the Splines menu. These are parametric splines, which means that they have adjustable attributes in the attribute manager. Just like primitive objects, these are non-destructive, which means that you can change the parameters at any time without affecting the spline's underlying structure. The splines that you draw yourself using tools like the pen tool or the sketch tool are called editable splines. These do not have parameter controls. Instead, they give you full point-by-point control, meaning that you can select, move, add, or delete individual points and handles to create custom shapes. Editable splines are more flexible in terms of design, but are destructive, meaning that changes are manual and are not easily reversible once made. This is the first time that you are exposed to editable objects, so it's important that you understand the difference. When something has parameters, you can always go back by typing a number in the attributes manager. But with an editable object, you cannot do that. You can go back, but either you manually change it back or you use undo to go back one step at a time. Be aware that you only have so many undos. So for example, if I'm 100 steps into twisting this circle, I can't just type in go back to how you were and have it snap. I actually have to manually either move the points or press undo until hopefully I didn't twist it back enough that there is no undoing. With a parametric circle, I can just type in go back to how you were. But with a parametric spline, I can't make something like this. So you can see where each one has their pros and their cons. Let's first discuss the primitive or parametric splines. A few things to notice. These splines come out with a symbol and a name corresponding what they are. They also have a visibility dot and an object activation check. If you click on any one of them, you will notice that in the Attributes Manager, you will have their corresponding properties, as well as the fact that whichever one I am clicking on is the one that is highlighted on the viewport. Please make sure that you are playing around with all of these splines and their properties so that you can see what they do and how they can be altered. When a spline is editable, notice that in the Object Manager, they have a different icon, one of a spline. You can see the vertex points of an editable spline, but you need to be in point mode in order to be able to see them. And you can move these points in X, Y, or Z, as well as scale them together or apart and rotate them. Also notice in the attributes, I no longer have the properties that allow me to just snap back. Now I have different properties that give me some control, but I don't have an easy type in a number here and have it snap like I did before. Be aware that splines themselves do not render anything because they are not geometry. So anytime that you're working exclusively with splines, you need generators to turn them into geometry. We will cover that later on. You can convert a parametric spline into an editable spline by making it editable. To do this, press the Make Editable button down here or use the shortcut C on your keyboard. Once you do that, you lose access to its original attributes, but you gain access to individual points that you can further alter. You cannot make an editable spline back into a parametric spline unless you undo the action. Look at my circle spline. When it is parametric, it has the icon of the circle and it has the properties in the attributes manager. Even if I am on point mode, I cannot access its individual points. Now, if I press C on my keyboard or go to the Make Editable button, you see that the icon changed to that of a spline, the attributes are gone, and if I go to point mode instead of model mode, I can access the individual points of the spline and edit them. Something to note is that when you are in point mode, if you want to move your entire spline, you would have to select all of the points. You can do this with the shortcut Control or Command A, or you can go to Select, Select All. Notice that the axis is right at the average of all the points you have selected, and now I can move them around. The other way to select everything and move it is going to Model Mode, which selects the entire model, and move that around. You can also create your own editable splines using the spline tools. The spline pen, which is the first option, is the one that we will use the most. You should always draw your splines in one of your orthographic views, meaning top, front, or side, so that you have control over which plane you are drawing in. Otherwise, you can think that you are drawing in one plane in perspective view, only to realize that the spline is now all twisted in a bunch of different dimensions at the same time. So let's go to the 4-panel view by either clicking on the shortcut middle mouse button click or going to this icon up here. And preferably, I want you to draw in the front view so that your splines are facing you. Click on the pen tool, and there are 2 types of vertices that you can create. This determines what kind of spline you will be drawing. The first one is a linear spline. This spline is made with hard interpolation points, which are points created by clicking just once on the viewport. Notice that once I click with the pen tool, I was automatically switched from my model mode to my point mode so that I could see the points that I am making. Anyways, back to making points. Follow along and click once anywhere on the viewport. As you can see, a vertex point got created. And now a spline is following our mouse. Wherever we decide to click next to create our second point, the line will connect the 2 vertex points. Let's create a few more by clicking around the viewport. If you're done creating points, you have 2 options. You can cancel your spline and leave it open, or you can close it. To close it, connect the last point to the first one. See that icon right there that is telling you that you're about to close the spline. If you want to leave it open, press Escape on your keyboard. And if you want to continue an open spline, you can go and find the last point that you created, click on it once, and once again your line will be attached so that you can create more points. Whether your spline is open or closed, there will be an attribute in the Attributes Manager that tells you so. If you have your spline selected, you will see that you can check on and off your Close Spline attribute, and this will close your spline if it's open by automatically adding a line there. Hard interpolation points connect linearly to other points and have no curves or tangent controls. The second type of vertices are those with soft interpolation, which allows for curves and give you tangent controls. The technique is similar, but instead of just clicking once on the viewport, you click and hold your click while dragging your mouse right or left. And when you do this, you see these tangents. These tangents decide the direction that your spline is going to follow. So if I go and let this go, you see that the tangent is going towards the right. If I make a second point anywhere, you will see that my spline is trying to follow the direction of my tangent. So wherever I make the second point, it will first be coming out of this tangent and then matching my second point. So notice that my curve is matching the forward tangent of my first point and the backward tangent of my second point. If I manipulate these, notice how the curve is changing with them. When working with soft interpolation points, while the tangent determines the direction of your spline, you can change this direction by manipulating the tangent itself. There's a few ways to do this. If you're actively working on creating your next point by clicking and dragging, if you hold Shift on your keyboard, you can disconnect these tangents. That way, you are not forced to follow the direction of the straight line tangent. And instead, you can create a sharp turn here. Hold Shift on your keyboard and your forward tangent will disconnect and allow you to change the direction of your next line. The other way is that if you have already created your point, you can always go back and select the point, hold Shift, and disconnect that tangent so that you can manipulate it. If you go back in and try to move the tangent, you will see that they stay disconnected. If you want to connect them again, just hold Shift on your keyboard and you see that now it stayed connected in that new shape you gave it. Disconnecting your splines would be the only way to achieve something like a heart, because here you need to go back up to be able to create the other side. So if you follow this tangent, you won't be able to do it without that curve forcing you to go down. So you need to go in here, hold Shift, move the tangent upwards so it matches the other one because I want to create a similar curve. And now I can finish the heart. Splines are always live, which means that you can go back and further edit them. You can also remove and add points to splines that are already made. To remove them, hold Ctrl or Command on your keyboard and hover over the point you want to remove. Notice that it gives you a preview of how the new spline will look once you remove this point. If you're happy with that, click on the point once and it will be removed. To add a point, you want to do a similar thing, but instead of hovering over a point, you want to hover over a line. You will see that you will get a little dash that shows you you're going to add a cut there, and that adds a point. So click once, and now I have this point that I can further manipulate. Something to note is that for soft interpolation points, when you close your spline by clicking on the first point with the last point, Cinema 4D will give you the position that it thinks you should have. You can fix this after the fact, so close it first and then go fix a tangent. You can move points by selecting them with the pencil and just dragging them anywhere. You can also just click and drag on the lines that connect the points and move those as well, and that's going to move both of the tangents that make up those points. You can also move points by selecting them with your brush selection and using the Move tool. You can scale points together by selecting them and then using the Scale tool. Remember that your axis comes out at the average of whatever you have selected, so scaling your points will bring them together. You can also rotate the points. In addition, you can change the interpolation of a point from soft to hard by double-clicking on the point itself. Notice that hard interpolation points make linear splines and have no tangents, while soft interpolation points make curved splines and have tangents. Please remember that you have to be in point mode in order to see points. So even if your spline is editable, if you're not in point mode, you're not going to be able to see them. Something else to note, and I don't want to confuse you too much, but I want you to be aware of it in case you need to undo to prevent splines from fusing together. If you draw a spline and leave it open, and you have it selected in your Objects Manager, any other spline that you draw will get added to the same spline object. This means that if later on you want to do something with that object, all of the splines would be affected by that. If you draw a closed spline and then draw another spline, they will be separate objects until you close the second spline. Then they're going to merge, and once again, you will have two separate splines under the same spline object. Inversely, if you draw an open spline and then draw a closed one, even if it is selected, they will be separate objects. I don't expect you to memorize this, but I just want you to be aware that splines merge into one object. So if you want your splines to be their own object, which usually you do, simply deselect them in the Object Manager by clicking anywhere else on it, and then drawing your brand new spline. An easy shortcut for this is that if you draw your spline and then press Escape until your spline becomes grayed out, that way you know that your spline is not selected, and then you can draw your next one. If you are drawing your splines and mistakenly they fall into the same object, you can separate them by using the Split tool. The Split tool allows you to create a separate object from the selected points, edges, or polygons that you have. When used in splines, select the points that you want to remove, right-click, and find Split. Make sure that you check that your split separated the points and didn't leave a copy of your previous spline object. In the latest versions of Cinema 4D, Split simply disconnects them and creates a new spline for you. But this is because of this setting found by clicking on the cogwheel next to Split. In previous versions, it would leave a copy of the points in the original one, and you have to go back and manually delete them. If instead you have multiple spline objects that you want to connect into a single object, select them in the Object Manager, right-click on top of any of their names, and select Connect Objects plus Delete. This will connect your separate objects into one and delete any individual copies. This is helpful if you want to use a generator later on, like the extrude, and you want one spline to be the outer edge and another to be the inner edge. We'll get to that in the next video. Whenever you're working with splines, if you want to draw a straight line, you can do this a few ways. The first one is to draw your points as close to a straight line as you can, and then use the scale tool after that. So you want to select your points. For example, let's say I want these two to be straight. I would select them, go to my scale tool, and then I want to flatten them out in Y because I want them to be aligned in Y. So I would select my scale tool and bring it down. Once I start making the scaling, you can see that the numbers are going in decimals. If I hold Shift, they will go by 5s until I get to 0%, and now I know that both of these points are aligned to one another. This is a better visual of exactly what is happening here. Again, every time that you have your axis and you have multiple objects selected, your axis will be at the average. So if I start scaling them down, they will scale towards the axis, and 0% will flatten them out. If I want to flatten them out in another dimension, in this case, I want them to be aligned in this direction in X, I would select them, go to my scale tool, and then flatten them out in X. You want to make sure that you first start scaling down and then you hold Shift. Another way is to use your snapping tools. Enable Snap is a setting that you can turn on and off that has a variety of settings for you to have your mouse snap to various elements. Clicking on the magnet icon turns it on, but you have to go to its settings right next to it and select what you want it to snap to. For splines, grid/work plane is a good one to have selected, as then you can zoom into the grid, and anywhere that your mouse is that is close to a grid point, your mouse will snap to it. This allows you to create straight lines pretty easily. Once you're done with your snapping tools, you want to make sure you turn that off. One more thing I want to mention, if you are working in your front view and you try to rotate the camera, it will rotate it in a way that can be a little disorienting. So you can snap back to the way that it was by using the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-Z, which undoes a camera change, or you can do View, Frame Default, and that will snap back to the way that the front view was originally meant to be seen. All right, let's take a quick pause here. Pause the video and go practice making a spline with hard interpolation points and one with soft interpolation points. Add points, remove points, change the tangent controls, etc. Once you feel comfortable with the idea, it's time to do the assignment spline drawing in Brightspace. I will very quickly go over the other ways to create splines, but your pen tool is the one that you should focus on. Sketch is an easy way to sketch out splines by drawing them directly on the viewport, but you get very little control over where those points are being created and how many of them there are. The Spline Arc tool allows you to create arcs between segments by clicking and dragging on existing splines or clicking and dragging with the tool itself. The Spline Smooth tool is very useful whenever you're drawing with your Spline pen tool, as it allows you to smooth out the curvature of your splines. It is useful when you have a generator that you're creating geometry out of a spline, but let's say one part of it is a little bit too sharp, because you can use it as an iron, click and drag slowly, and it will smooth out your spline. You can change the strength of it, meaning how much it is smoothing it out, by clicking here. So it smooths out your spline by adding additional points. All right, that's the end of this video. See you on the next one.